All right, well, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be a powerful and practical session on one of the most overlooked yet critical leadership skills, decision making. At TTA, we partner with organizations every day to help build leadership capabilities that truly move the needle, and today's topic hits the heart of that mission. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Chris Seifert. Chris is the founder of Enabling Empowerment and the author of Enabling Empowerment, a leadership playbook for ending micromanagement and empowering decision makers. With over 20 years of experience across military leadership, manufacturing operations, and strategic advisory roles, Chris brings a rare blend of practical know-how and transformative thinking. Chris has spent his career helping organizations build leadership cultures rooted in trust, accountability, and sound decision-making. His 7-step decision-making framework has become a go-to tool for leaders seeking to reduce risk, accelerate execution, and deliver real business results. In today's webinar, Chris will walk us through why decision-making is in fact a skill that can be taught, strengthened, and scaled. He'll also show us how adding structured decision-making to your leadership development programs can create measurable ROI and lasting impact across your organization. Please join me in welcoming Chris Seifert.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate the introduction and welcome everybody. So, I think, John, that was a great introduction. Just a little bit more on my background. I spent the first 8 years of my career in the U.S. Navy in the submarine force, and then I spent about 20 years in operations in manufacturing, oil and gas, chemical, also some time in consulting. And over the course of my career, one of the things that I had discovered was that, my teams, if I wanted to empower my teams, I really needed to help them be better at making decisions, right? It not only helped me, allowed me to delegate more authority to them, it also benefited them in terms of development. And over the course of my career, I developed a specific training and methodology that I taught to my teams. And a couple years ago, I wrote this book, Enabling Empowerment, that you see on the screen, and so I'm going to share some things about that with you today. But look, as a thank you for joining live here, if you'd like a copy of the Kindle version of the book or the audio version, please just type Kindle or audio into the chat, and I'll follow up after this is over and make sure that I can get you one of those copies for free so that you can have that as a thank you for joining us. So, all right, without further ado, we'll get right into the topic. So, we're going to talk about why decision-making training matters, and as John said, specifically how you can show a return on investment for your leadership development training when you're including decision-making training. So as we go through this training today, we're going to use a couple tools to make this a little more interactive. So one of them is this voting technology. And so let's just to try this out and make sure everybody can use it. You'll see on your screen here a question: does your company have a formal leadership development program? And there's 3 ways that you can participate in this. First, there's a QR code in the upper right-hand corner of the screen that you should be able to scan, and it'll take you live to it using your phone. Or you can text C Seifert 705 to 22333. So just open up your texting app, type in 22333, and then text C Seifert 705. Or there's a link there, pollev.com. So go to your web browser, pollev.com/C Seifert 705. And all of those should allow you to vote. You should only have to do that one time, and then you'll be in for the whole session. So if you can go ahead and pick one of those 3 and put the vote in. Good. We see some coming in here. We'll give you a minute or 2 to get this figured out while we wait for final people to join in. Yeah, and I think Jerry put the link in the chat too. So if you're having trouble, you can click on the link in the chat. Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've got a couple. Okay, so the link, if you're looking for it, again, let's go. There's a couple options. There's a QR code in the upper right-hand corner. You can no survey at the link address. So the QR code should be on your screen. We got a couple people it's worked for. Let's try a second one. So do you see codes now?
No, I don't see the QR code.
Well, it's showing on mine. And it was showing earlier, so of course it's not working. For a couple people it is. Okay, so here, I'll type the text in. Yeah, so I think Jerry's put the text in a few times, but if you open up your texting app and text to 22333, and then you text CSEIFERT 705, it will enter you into the session. Looks like a few people are getting it now. And then you can just pick A or B. There we go. Good. All right. Okay, so we'll keep going. Looks like we've got at least a few people, and if not, we can always use the text as well. So, all right. So continuing on, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about why decision making should be part of your leadership development program. We're going to talk about why that training should include training on a structured decision making framework. And we're going to talk about why the framework that I teach is, obviously the one that I believe that you should use to do that. And then finally, we're going to connect this to how can you use this training to show positive return on investment for your leadership development program. I've been a vice president of operations for a large publicly traded company. I worked very closely with a leadership development team, my HR team, on crafting training programs for my emerging leaders. And I know one of the things that they were under a lot of pressure from other executives were, what are we getting for this investment? We're spending money on training these people. Show me the money that we're getting back, right? So I completely understand and identify with that. And I'm going to show you a way that you can structure this training so that you can literally put the return on investment into your leadership team's hands and say, this is exactly how much money we've made because we did this training. All right. So let's start with great companies, great leaders, terrible decisions. I'm going to give you 3 case studies that demonstrate this exactly. Let's start with Blockbuster. So everybody will remember, Blockbuster back in the 90s was a tremendous success, massive. There were stores, thousands of stores, millions of people going to Blockbuster. I mean, it was the thing in the 90s, the thing to do on a Friday night was to go pick out your movie for the weekend. And it was a tremendous success. The stock price like quadrupled over a decade and was killing it. But around 2000, a little startup called Netflix started a business where they were emailing DVDs through the mail. And Blockbuster actually had an opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million and said, we'll pass, right? We don't think that's really going to work out that well, so we'll pass. Well, everybody knows the story today. Blockbuster's gone. There's actually 1 store left in the state of Washington, but otherwise they're out of business, and Netflix is like one of the Magnificent Seven stocks now. So company that was doing great, had great leadership, had grown tremendously, one bad decision, end of the company. Another one, Kodak. So most people know Kodak, right, as a film company that made camera film. A lot of people don't know that Kodak actually invented the digital camera in the 1970s, decades before it became popular. They invented it and then they buried the technology because they were concerned about it cannibalizing their business. So rather than embracing the technology and leading and being the revolutionary and taking over the market, they buried it. Some other people invented digital cameras, Kodak out of business. And then finally, another one, New Coke. So Coke and Pepsi back in the 90s, right? We're in the cola wars. Coke actually did a ton. There were, if for those who were around may remember the Pepsi Challenge commercials where people were doing blind taste tests and saying Pepsi tasted better. So Coke actually did a ton of market research on blind taste tests, found out that in fact, this was true. Pepsi wasn't making it up. People actually preferred Pepsi. So they reformulated Coke to make New Coke and launched this product. Well, and people actually preferred in blind taste tests New Coke to old Coke. Unfortunately, they were so emotionally attached to the old flavor that when they launched New Coke, it was a massive failure, horrible news cycle. They ended up having to revert back and reissue classic Coke so that they could get out of this. And it's gone down in history as one of the biggest marketing flops of all time. So again, another decision not made by dumb people, not made by people who didn't care. In fact, they put a ton of research into it, but just a bad decision that almost wrecked the company. So it should be hopefully pretty clear to you that if one or two really bad decisions can just absolutely destroy a company, and it's not a matter of being reckless or not smart or not good. It's there's we're going to talk about the traps that people can fall into that cause them to make bad decisions. And you may be saying, well, Chris, those are right interesting, but those are like CEO level, those are C-suite level decisions. But I'll also tell you that, hey, while maybe your frontline leaders and your middle managers in your company are not making decisions like as big as those, they're making hundreds of decisions every day. They're making decisions about how to handle a customer that's upset, how to deal with a machine that's broken or a production stoppage. They're making decisions about pricing and features on new products. And if we're not teaching them how to training them on how to make those decisions, we're just leaving it to intuition and experience, right? By definition, the more we promote people into leadership roles, the bigger their scope of responsibility for making decisions gets. And if we're not treating it like a skill and giving them opportunities to train and practice in a safe space, then we're just, leaving it to chance that they're going to make good decisions or they're going to have to learn from their failures, which is going to cost the company money and it's going to hurt them professionally. Right. So the challenge here is that we're not teaching decision making in schools, right? That's not, especially, I mean, if you went to engineering or operations or human resources, right? You learned technical skills, but you didn't learn business decisions, how to make business decisions. And so we're promoting people into these roles without getting that structured training. But the other challenge is that our brains aren't really hardwired for making good business decisions. There's some flaws in the way that we think, in particular, that causes challenges in a business environment. And I want to talk about those for a minute. So here's one of these questions. Hopefully you can get the voting technology to work. If not, just you can put the answer in the chat. But how do you pronounce the capital of Kentucky? Do you pronounce it A, Louisville, or B, Louisville? Okay. Got a few people voting there. All right. Looks like the consensus is forming around Louisville. All right. So the answer is you actually pronounce the capital of Kentucky Frankfort because Frankfort is the capital of Kentucky. Now, the city Louisville If you're in Kentucky, they pronounce it more like Louisville, like they've got a bag of marbles in their mouth, but it's not Louisville or Louisville. Either one, it doesn't matter because the capital of Kentucky is Frankfurt. So what happened here? What happened here is the way that I framed this question caused you to turn it into an either or answer, right? And not even to think about is Louisville, however you pronounce it, actually the capital of Kentucky, right? So this is a trap called the framing trap. Let's look at another one. So this is Ronald, right? Ronald is either a librarian or a salesman. He can best be described as reserved, and there's no doubt that Ronald is an introvert. Do you think it's more likely that Ronald is a librarian or a salesman? Okay. So again, if you want to vote on the screen there, do you think he's more likely a librarian or a salesman? Or feel free to just type it in the chat if the voting's not working. All right. Good. So look, a little bit more. Most people, I think, coming around that, hey, Ronald's probably a librarian, right? And that would seem to make sense. I mean, I think most of us would think about, if we think about a librarian, we think of somebody who, is working in an environment where it's quiet. They're not talking. If we think of a salesman, we think of somebody who's got to be outgoing and calling people and talking to people. And so we're given this clue that Ronald is an introvert. And so we tend to think that it's probably more likely that Ronald would be a librarian. But here's something that, data you weren't given, but you could have inferred. How many salespeople are there in the world compared to librarians, right? I don't know the answer to that, but I would guess there's probably like 1,000 salespeople for every librarian that there is out there, right? And if you just think, so that probably means in some of those salesmen, even if it's a small percent, even if it's 1% of salesmen are introverts and 100% of librarians were introverts, there's probably still more introverted salesmen than there are librarians in total, right? And so if you just kind of consider those statistics, it's more likely that Ronald is a librarian. I mean, sorry, a salesman, just because there's more salesmen. But our brain didn't think about those statistics until I started talking to you. Our brain liked to connect introvert to, hey, well, that sounds more like a salesperson, right? So this is called the base rate neglect. Our brains have a tendency to ignore statistics especially when they're not given to us, right? Or to think about what those statistical base rates are. Here's another example of the way we can make faulty decisions. So if you were to consider researching, are cats better than dogs, right? Or if, let's say, you had to research which you thought was better, dogs or cats, and you have a bias. Let's say you like dogs better, so you happen to search, are dogs better than cats? This is what you would get in Google. You would get several responses: 8 reasons dogs are better than cats, 20 reasons dogs are better than cats, and I like that last one, 11 scientific reasons. So it's scientific that dogs are better than cats. But, if I prefer cats, I might search, are cats better than dogs? And I get a completely different Google search when I do that, right? I get 10 reasons why cats are better, why cats are better than dogs, 10 reasons why cats make great pets, right? So just my bias, my slight bias in which I prefer might cause me to change the order of those words when I search. And that's going to give me a whole bunch of different answers that confirm my pre-existing belief. And this is called confirmation bias, right? And so you can see how easily the way we already think might shape our answer when we go to research something. All right. And then finally, so this is actually from a true study. There's a study of the incidence of kidney cancer across 3,141 counties in the United States, revealed a remarkable pattern. It revealed that the counties in which the incidence of kidney cancer was the lowest were mostly rural, sparsely populated, and located in predominantly Republican states such as the Midwest, the South, and the West. Okay. So this is a true stat, right? So the lowest incidence of kidney cancer are mostly located in rural, sparsely populated, mostly Republican counties. So you could probably imagine some of the newspaper articles that you might see coming out of this study, right? Things like study says good moral values lead to lower incidence of kidney cancer, right? These good, hardy, Republicans that live in these rural counties, that's why they got lower cancer. Or it's these nice the clean air in these rural counties that's leading to lower cancer. Or they're farmers and they're eating their veggies, so they have lower cancer, right? But what have I told you? The same study also showed that the highest incident rates of kidney cancer were also in rural, sparsely populated states located traditionally in Republican states like the Midwest, the South, and the West. And again, this is true, but you could expect that the kind of newspaper articles you might see here that, hey, poverty is leading to cancer, right? These poor, hey, in the South they're eating more, fried foods. And so that's why people are getting cancer. So, the reality is none of these headlines that we can imagine and likely probably have been written as a result of this study, none of them have anything to do with how you can have the highest rates of kidney cancer and the lowest rates both in sparsely populated rural counties, right? The reason is because they're sparsely populated, and it's just a statistical anomaly that occurs with small sample sizes. The smaller the sample size is, the more one or two cases impacts the incident rate. So it makes sense that in these sparsely populated towns, we have some of them are the lowest in the country and some of them are the highest in the country, because one or two additional incidents in those sparsely populated counties has a much bigger effect on the rate than it does in the really large counties. And this is called the law of small numbers. All right. So what's happening with these, right? These were all examples, what I just shared with you, of what I call decision traps. They're shortcuts that our brains take that cause us to make bad decisions. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes here going over the neuroscience with you to explain to you exactly what is happening and why your brain is, why our brains can be tricked by things like this. So let's start with this first image. What do you see when I put this image up on the screen? What immediately comes to your mind? Right? I think if you're like most people, you immediately recognize she's angry, right? She looks upset. She's probably going to yell at me, right? There's definitely some feelings that come to our mind. And those aren't like, we don't think about that. They just kind of pop in right away. They're instantaneous, right? They just show up right there in our brain, and we think them. Okay. Now, when I put this in the screen, what comes to your mind? Okay. If you're like me, you probably look at that and you go, well, that's a multiplication problem. That comes right away. And then you think to yourself, I could probably solve that, but I probably don't really want to, right? Because it's going to take some effort. I'm going to have to stop doing some things. I'm probably going to have to stop talking. I'm going to have to concentrate and think and take some effort in order to come up with what that, yeah, so where's my calculator, right? That's exactly the kind of thing that I might pop into my head. Okay. So what these are, I want to illustrate this to you, is your brain has two different modes of thinking, right? We'll call that first one system one. System one thinking is your fast snap judgments. It's unconscious reasoning. It's they're decisions that you make based on correlation. I've seen angry people's faces many, many times in my lifetime. And so I very quick and easy for me to recognize a face of somebody who's angry and say that person's angry, right? Our brains have a large capacity for these kinds of decisions, right? It didn't take any effort at all. It's instantaneous. We can be actually making many of these decisions at the same time. If you think about driving down the road in your car, you're making dozens of these decisions every minute, right? Or second even. You know, you're judging how far the car is in front of you or behind you or to the right of you, and you're making decisions about, do I need to speed up, slow down, change lanes? And they're effortless. They require no conscious thought or reason, and they're not based on cause and effect, they're based on correlation. So that's our system one thinking. System two thinking is the math problem. Beyond recognizing that it's a math problem, it's the actually solving it, right? It's slow, it's effortful, it requires conscious thought, it requires cause and effect thinking. I have a limited capacity for these kinds of decisions. In fact, if I was to put heart monitors on me and, you know, a thermometer, as I thought through what this math problem is in my head, I would actually see my heart rate increase, my temperature go up a little bit. You know, if I was tapping my foot, I'd probably stop tapping my foot. The point is, there's actual physical changes that occur for me to use this kind of thinking in my brain. And so we'll call this system two thinking. Okay. And so a little bit on how these two ways of thinking work together. If you look on the screen, what do you see on the left-hand side of the screen, right? If you're like most people, you probably see the letters A, B, C, right? If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you probably see 12, 13, 14. But if you look really closely, what you'll notice is that the B and the 13 are exactly the same shape, right? So what's happening here? What's happening is my system one thinking wants to make a decision as fast as it can, right? That's its job. Its job is to take information as fast as possible to create an answer that I can act on, right? So again, think back to driving down the road. It sees that out of the car. It needs to come up with a recommendation as fast as possible to me to say, should I speed up, slow down, whatever. So one of the things that system one does to help it make decisions faster is it simplifies things, right? One of those things it does is it takes things into context. Like that shape it's not clear that it's a B, but because it's an A and a C, between an A and a C, my brain says it must be a B, right? Similarly, when I put a 12 and a 14 on either side of it, my brain jumps to the conclusion that it must be a 13. Right. And the example in the middle, if I said to you, Anne approached the bank, and, you know, depending on where you are right now, if you're, you know, since you're sitting in front of a computer screen, probably in a business, maybe in a city, you know, you probably think of a lady walking up to a financial institution. But if we were sitting next to a lake and I said, Anne approached the bank, you would probably assume she was approaching the bank of the lake or the river. And so just the context that we're in, you know, system one uses that to jump to conclusions more quickly, right? Here's another little math problem. So this one you can vote on the screen, or again, you can just put it in the chat if that's what's working for you. But a bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay. So don't overthink it. Just type your answer in there real quick. Okay, good. Look, so got a few answers of 10 cents, right? So the correct answer is actually 5 cents. Because if you took 10 cents and the bat cost $1 more than the ball, then the bat would cost $1.10 and the sum would be $1.20. That's too much, right? So it's got to be 5 cents. Then the bat costs $1.05. The sum is $1.10. But don't feel bad. Look, this is like, you know, one of these questions that 90% of the population gets wrong when they first look at it. Because of the way it's set up, it's intended, your system one is led to make the thought that it's 10 cents because just the way the question is structured, right? But even if you got 5 cents, Your brain, here's how your brain probably thought. Your brain probably thought about it exactly like I described it. Your initial reaction is, well, the bat and ball costs $1.10, the bat costs $1 more. Let me subtract $1 from $1.10, the ball costs 10 cents. But then if you check the answer, you go, well, then that would mean the bat costs $1.10, the total is $1.20. That can't be right. It's got to be something else. And that thought process I just described is exactly how system one and system two work together. So that's what's happening in your brain all the time. Anytime you're presented with information, system one comes up with an answer as fast as it can. That's its job. Its job is to make an answer as fast as it can. And it passes that answer to system two. And system two's job is to check the answer and say, is this right? Does it make sense? If it's not right, then system two's job is to engage and to think more heavily, more consciously about what the answer is. Okay. And so we just say that system one's job is to take shortcuts and make decisions quickly. Systems two job is to check the answer, but system two is lazy. System two doesn't want to engage because it requires effort. And if you think about it, this is actually a good thing. I mean, this is how our brains are designed by work to work. On purpose, so that because as we go through our day, we are faced with thousands, literally thousands and thousands of decisions. And if we engage system two on every decision, then we would not leave our bedroom in the morning, right? We wouldn't be able to figure out what to wear. We would be stuck. So our brain has to constantly just be making these system one decisions, passing it to system two, and system two has to have a bias to accept system one's answer as good enough and move on, right? I like to frame it as our brains are wired to be efficient, not perfect, okay? And most of the time, that's a really, really good thing. The problem is that when we are faced with decisions that are really important, like should I buy Netflix for $50 million or should I launch a new version of my soda? Those shortcuts can lead to really catastrophic decisions, and that can happen. Again, hey, I have an upset customer here. How should I deal with this person? I have a machine that's broken. What should I do about that? I have an order that's late. How should I handle that? Our brains, those decisions aren't ones that we face on a routine basis. They have complexity, they have uncertainty. So these shortcuts can cause us to make really terrible decisions. And just a final illustration I'll give you is that if you look at this picture, which of the three people seems to be the largest to you? Okay. So if you look, you'll see the person on the right appears, to most people appears to be the largest. If you hold up a measure, a ruler, what you'll see is they're actually all three the same size. But what's going on here? What's going on here is your brain has learned over time that converging lines indicate distance. And because the person on the right, because of that, your brain is saying the person on the right must be farther away. And even though it sees that they're all the same size, it actually adjusts it in your brain to make it look bigger because it says it must be bigger because it's further away, right? So that's why that optical illusion is happening. It's system one making some corrections in order to take the information it has and fit it in context. Right. So here's the challenge. The challenge is, even though I just explained that to you, you still see the person on the right is bigger. Right. Even though you know the truth, you can't unsee it. And our brains work the same way. Right. So a lot of this research came from a gentleman called Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And he, in his book, said the best that we can do is a compromise. Learn to recognize situations in which mistakes are likely and try harder to avoid significant mistakes when the stakes are high. All right. So in his research, he said, look, this is the way our brains work. Most of the time it's good, but in some situations, in particular in business where we have complex and uncertain decisions, it's not good, right? It can be very bad, in fact. But his conclusion was there's not a whole lot that we can do about that. Fortunately, since then, there's been a lot of research And this research study in particular found that, hey, training does work. In this one, they found that in an experiment where they exposed people in a single intervention to the decision traps, just the way that we just did on going through the exercises we just did, just by teaching you those things, you're 30% less likely to fall for the same mistake the next time, right? So training works by teaching our teams about these kinds of decision traps. And I showed you like four. I've got there's like 25, 30 of these things. But when you teach people about these, they're 30%, at least just, from this study, less likely to fall for them. The other thing is that we can implement processes for making decisions in complexity and uncertainty that make us less likely to fall for these traps and to make better decisions. And so this was a research study from McKinsey where they found that organizations who implemented a structured decision-making process for making high-risk decisions had 6 times better results than organizations that just taught how to do analysis, right? So 2 things. One, teaching people how to recognize the decision traps and be more aware of them so they are less likely to fall for them. And 2, implementing a structured decision-making framework and teaching them a structured decision-making process so that they can be less likely to fall for them. And this is an example of a decision, when I say structured decision-making process that you can teach people, of what I mean by that, right? So this is the one that I teach, have developed over, my 20 years or so, and I've taught to thousands of people on saying, hey, look, when we're going to make a decision, and particularly a decision that involves complexity or uncertainty, this is the process we're going to follow, right? We're going to frame the problem or the opportunity. We're going to identify a range of alternatives. We're going to identify the key drivers of the decision, what really matters. We're going to talk about what the risks are. Then we're going to do economic analysis. We'll determine what the next steps are. And then finally, we're going to write down what we just did in the previous 6 steps so that when we come back and look at our decision later, we remember what we did. Because one of the traps is called hindsight bias, which means we tend to forget what we actually knew when we made decisions. And so, yes, and someone had asked, will this deck be shared? Yes, I'll share this. You'll have this slide. I'm also going to tell you where you can get a ton of these kind of resources for free and access them if you want to use them. But when I say you need to be teaching your team, if you have a leadership development program or future leaders, emerging leaders, you need to be teaching them a structured decision-making framework. This is what I mean. A few things on how that framework I just showed you is different. If you just go Google decision-making processes or decision-making frameworks, what you're going to see in most cases is something like what's on the screen right now, right? It's going to start with defining the problem, but then it's going to say, gather data, analyze the data, make the decision, right? And my experience is that's not really very helpful. One of the things, so a lot of the people, I was helping were people who were engineers or operations people who maybe were considering, hey, do we need to buy this new machine, or should we make this change to our workflow process or whatever? And they were having to analyze it. And what I would find is the gather data phase would take like a month. They'd be out there studying every bit of data in the world and fall into analysis paralysis, right? And be unable to make a decision. So one of the things that's unique about the way I teach decision making is, look, at the end of the day, what you'll find is most decisions, there's really only a couple of variables that matter. That if I get these couple variables correct, then I'm going to have a better chance of success, right? I'm going to be right. And there's the rest of these really don't matter. And so rather than just going out and willy-nilly gathering data, one of the things I teach people to do is sit down and say, hey, let's talk about what those couple variables are that really matter in this decision. And then let's just go gather data about those. Right? I call those the key drivers. What are the key drivers? What are the 2 or 3 things that are going to make this decision right? Another key principle that I teach people is to use ranges of estimates, right? So instead of coming into the meeting and saying, hey, this project is going to have a 15% return on investment, which turns into a giant argument, then you should be telling them, hey, this is going to be between 10% and 20%. And here's the things that could go wrong that make it 10%. And here's the things that go right that make it 20%. And that turns, instead of having an argument over whose number's correct, we start being able to work together and collaborate better to figure out how do we make sure the upside happens and the downside doesn't. Okay. So look, that's just like two real quick points on what's different about this framework than if you just Googled decision-making framework. But again, I'll give you some resources. You can read more about that. So let's talk about the final point. Hopefully you are aligned now that if decision-making is not part of your leadership development training, it should be. And that number two, that training shouldn't just be on like decision-making styles or some of those other kinds of it should actually be on a structured decision-making process that we should be teaching people and giving them opportunity to practice. And then hopefully you understand the difference between the framework that I just showed on why that's probably different than if you just go Google decision-making framework. Now let's talk about, so how do I do this in a way that actually creates ROI? We're not just spending money, we're actually creating a return on investment for the business. So the first step is, well, we need to do this training, right? And so there's several ways. I mean, you can do research and develop the training. I obviously have online training. I do workshops. I help, I do this baseline training, but we need to teach people about decision traps. We need to teach them the structured decision-making framework. The next thing we need to do is give them some opportunities to practice it. So what I'll do with folks is help them pick, so let's say 30 people go through the training. We might pick 10 people and say, hey, these 10 people, we're going to pick a specific decision or opportunity or problem that the company, needs to make a decision about. And they're going to get one-on-one training and coaching to use the framework to make a recommendation to leadership about what to do about that decision. And then finally, we're going to bring those people who've been through that one-on-one training together and have them in front of the group present to the leadership team their recommendations on how to solve that problem or that opportunity. And at the end of that presentation, we're getting leaders saying, yes, right? We're going to go spend $50,000 to buy that thing so that we can make $200,000, or we're going to go invest in that idea that you've had or that new product you've talked about. But at the end of the day, your training is now producing decisions out of leadership to go invest in things that they would not have made those decisions otherwise had these emerging leaders not brought them to them and framed them and presented them in a way that they could say yes to them, right? So that's a simple model for how you can, if you have a leadership development program, you can take it from just, hey, we're sitting people in a classroom and teaching them, to we're literally making a positive return on investment for the business. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of several ways you can do this training. I've got some online courses. And in fact, look, I'm happy to offer everybody on here. There's several versions of the course. The first one is on decision traps. If you would like me to send you a link to trial it for free, just type trial in the chat there. And again, I'll go back through this afterwards and I will connect to your name and send that trial link to you. Also, if you go to my YouTube channel, at Enabling Empowerment, you'll see a bunch of videos on decision traps. One of the things that I used to do with my teams was I would send them on like a Monday a short lesson, a one-pager on a decision trap, and then say on my Friday staff meeting, we're going to talk about this, right? We're going to spend 10 minutes talking about it. So I want you to read this, watch this between now and then on Friday, we're going to talk about it. And that way, kept them fresh in people's minds, and it made us more likely to recognize when we were following those. So that's another free resource that's out there.
Chris, Latash Alexander asks, how do you make this information transferable for higher education?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Jerry. Um, so look, you know, the format that I have this training in is definitely geared more towards like an emerging leader, right? For people who I like to frame it as people who don't have an MBA and don't want to get an MBA, but want to be able to make better business decisions, need to. Um, you know, I'd be happy to, and this is in this platform. The content's all there. And if you were saying to me, hey, Chris, I would like to incorporate this into a class that I teach in a university. I'm happy to meet with you and talk about how we can do that. I also have clients who've said, hey, Chris, I want this in my LMS, right? I don't want to, you got your online platform. That's great. I want this in my LMS. Happy to work with you on how to do that. And we can incorporate that. So, okay. Great. Good. Look, so we're getting into questions and look, if you have questions, keep typing them. I was just going to give you some more examples of how I deliver this training, but this is excellent. I'd rather answer questions if you got them. So, how is this framework integrating psychological safety is the question. Look, I think that here's how I would frame that as one of the key lessons that I believe people take away from the decision trap training, whether they take the online version, whether we do it, in a group setting the way that I exposed you all to those traps, hopefully didn't make you feel like just to be blunt, didn't make you feel stupid. It made you realize that this is how your brain works. This is normal, right? It's okay. I think there's a lot of stigma to these things. People often don't want to be told, well, you have confirmation bias or hindsight bias or anchoring or framing or whatever this traps. People like they have this negative reaction when they're told that they have these biases. What the purpose of me explaining the neuroscience behind this to you in system 1 and system 2 was to help you understand that this isn't a judgment thing. This is a nature thing, right? This is how your brain was literally, designed and has evolved over time. It's intended to think this way, and it's actually a good thing that you have confirmation bias and anchoring traps and framing. It's actually you would not make it through your day if you didn't have those things. The challenge is recognizing that in certain situations, they can cause you to make really bad decisions. And so learning how to recognize those circumstances, apply a structured decision-making framework can be helpful. So hopefully the long answer to that question is making it psychologically safe by making people understand this isn't a judgment. We're not judging you by telling you have these biases. It's a fact, right? It's human nature, and it's not even a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. We just need to learn how to use them properly. So, any other questions? Yes, though we'll make a version of the slides available, and there'll be a recording. And again, give me a few days. I'll have to go through the comments here. And again, if you wanted a Kindle version or an audio version of the book, just drop that in the chat. And if you would like the trial of the online course, just type trial, and I'll get that to you as well. But any other questions? Okay. Well, while you're thinking about if you have any other questions, as I mentioned, just some other ways you can engage. Somebody did ask for the YouTube link. That's the first one right there on the screen that you see. It's at Enabling Empowerment. So if you go to YouTube and search at Enabling Empowerment, the channel, you'll get to that. You can subscribe and, you'll see quite a few 4 to 6 minute videos on decision traps and other decision related content that are great to just email out to a team like, hey, watch this, let's have a discussion about it. Again, there's the online course and one other thing. So if when those who get the Kindle or the audio version, or if you happen to have a copy of the book, in the book, right, I titled the book A Leadership Playbook for Ending Micromanagement, Empowering Decision Makers. And it's literally intended to be a playbook. there are lots of tools and templates that are referenced in it. And if you go to my website, www.enablingempowerment.com, you'll see on the top menu, tools and skills button. If you click on that, all the templates that are mentioned in the book and more are available there for free to download. So, so some of the things like I, showed you on the slide forms, for helping you think through how to frame a problem, tip sheets for how to do a pre-mortem, which is a way to avoid some of the biases. There's an Excel financial model for people who, hey, I need some help modeling a financial decision or do an economic analysis. That's out there for free. So I encourage you to go check out the website as well and download that stuff. So, all right. Okay. I didn't see any other questions. Jerry, did you see any that I missed?
No, I did not. I think you caught them all.
Okay.
Because you addressed
Excellent.
slides, you addressed your free book, you addressed the audio, and you addressed YouTube.
All right. Great. Thanks. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I appreciate everybody joining. Appreciate the engagement. Sorry that we had a few challenges with the technology there at the front. I think we got it figured out well enough, but hopefully you got some value out of this, and would love to follow up and continue the conversation with anybody who wants to. So, all right. Thanks a lot.